Okay, so I've moved on to moving the drain for the sink now. So what I'm going to do in the first few minutes of this video is just talk through a few issues that I ran into in planning that all out. So if you remember in video number 10, I talked about cutting over to the right, dropping down, and then cutting back over. And I thought that was the greatest plan in the world. Everything was going to look good. So I went on a plumbing forum just to ask some questions to make sure. And a few of the plumbers said, well, why don't you just cut over to the right? And at the time, I had the supply lines in this area. I had the gray electrical line running down this wall. And then I had some other electrical lines here. So I was just trying to avoid all that stuff that was here. But I've since moved the shutoffs over here. The electrical lines that were running this way are up higher in the wall now. And so I can just cut over to the right. Now, the other thing was that there was an issue with what's called the flood rim level. If I was going to cut over to the right, drop down, and then cut back over. So that horizontal vent line right there has to be 6 inches or more above the rim level of the sink. And if I had cut over too low, if I wasn't paying attention to that particular code mention, if I had cut over too low, I would have been violating code. So I'm glad I didn't do that. So I decided to take the plumber's advice and just cut over to the right. But there was something about that advice that just didn't sit well with me. And the reason for my hesitancy was when I put a T in here to cut over to the right, this part of the T is going to fall right on that stud there. And the diameter here is 2¼ inches. The notch that I have to make to accommodate this T is going to be at least 2¼ inches, but it'll probably be more than that, a lot more than that, because this pipe is not right at the edge of the stud, it's about 1/4 inch back. And then I also want to leave a little bit of space between the T and the stud so that I don't have any kind of rattling or anything else going on in there or any rubbing. So it'll be closer to 2 3/4 of an inch when I'm all done. And that's a code violation. So I went back on the forum and I asked a follow-up question about that, and I think they were getting tired of me asking questions and they didn't answer that question. So I went off and did some more research, and what I came across is this here. This is called a stud shoe. And how it works is you put these over an area in a stud where you've notched deeper than what's allowed by code. And this particular stud shoe is a Simpson stud shoe. It's SS 1.5, I don't know if you can see that, and it's 16 gauge. So I went to the city and asked them about that, and they said, yep, that'll work just great. And so in order to put that in, I'm going to have to make sure I use the correct fasteners. And that's the only one recommendation, is that you have to make sure you use the fasteners that are recommended by the manufacturer. And to get this stud shoe, I had to actually go on Amazon.com. I could not find one in the stores anywhere. I checked Lowe's, I checked Home Depot. Lowe's had a stud shoe, but it was too small. And then Home Depot had one, but you'd have to order it on their site. So I got this one on Amazon for $7, and that's pretty much what I'm going to use. Okay, so as you can see here, I still have the floor open. And I could have done a lot of this drain work with the floor closed up, but I've also been doing a few other things in the crawl space since I have access from this bathroom here. The other thing was also that when I was shimming out this sole plate here to match up the part of the sole plate that I had replaced, I nailed a brad nail right through here, and I kept telling myself, be careful of the pipes when you nail into this sole plate here. But this one, I got one nail like right on the corner here, and it went into the pipe part way. I don't think it went all the way through, but I decided I'm just going to go ahead and replace below here just in case, since I'm doing the drain anyway. So as you can see here, I've got paper wrapped around here so I can use this as my guide for my cut. I've got the same thing down below there. You can't see that, but it's there. And then on the wall here, right there, that's my mark for the T. So the T will be about right there. That's the center point for the T. It's going to go that way. And so that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to start cutting here. I'm going to pull that section of pipe out, and then I'm going to start replacing it. And once I get all this pipe out, I'm going to make a cut right here in the wall too, so you'll see that also. Okay, so just like with the toilet drain, I had to make a second cut here. I was sawing through here and I didn't realize the cabinet in the kitchen was as close as it was, and so I started sawing, it threw me off, and I ended up going at an angle. So that's straight now, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the pipe down below, down here. I'm not going to show any video of that because it's so dark down there and it's really kind of pointless and worthless, so I'm going to go ahead and continue on. Okay, so this pipe is cut on both ends now, so I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. And what I'm going to do next is just go ahead and clean up this area here and get all the debris out of here before I continue on. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make my cutout in the wall for the T and the pipe that's going to go to the right there. And instead of using the T as my guide, I'm going to use a stud shoe as my guide, because the stud shoe ultimately has to fit over wherever I cut, and I have to be able to nail in and have enough meat to nail in. So by using this, I can just make sure that my cut's not too big. And as you can see here, there's about a 1/4 inch of space inside there, so that's pretty good. So I took my 19-inch mark and I've scribed it on the side here on the wall. I've taken some blue tape, and this represents the center point of this opening here. This is a 2.5 inch in diameter opening. And so I'll just put that on here. Line up the top of the tape with the mark that I scribed on the side. And then I've already done this actually. I take my pencil and I'll scribe on the edge of this hole here. I'll do that on both sides. And that's where I'll cut. The other thing I did, this hole is about 2 5/8 of an inch back from the edge of this stud. And when I took the pipe out, I realized that there was probably about a 1/4 inch of space between the pipe and this sole plate. So that told me that there was a pretty good amount of space there. And so I just transferred that same measurement to this stud. And that tells me that, that I should have pretty good spacing around the T that's going to go in there. I don't want to get too carried away with taking too much out of the stud, but at least I have a good idea. So I'm going to go ahead and make my cut next using the multi-tool. I'll do that on this wall, and that should be it. got the notch cut in here. What I'm going to do now is take a chisel and just clean this up a little bit, and that should be it. Okay, so I'm going to talk through now assembling this whole run of pipe here, and then I'll actually show you when it's all put together. So I've got this coupling here that's going to connect the pipe below the floor that I cut, and a new section of pipe that's going to run to the T. So there'll be a section of pipe between here. Then I'll have my T. Then I'll have a section of pipe here on top. And to connect that section of pipe on top to this existing pipe, I'm going to use this metal shielded coupling, which is this one here. And the part number is P3000-150. So just a word of warning, and maybe the code is different in your area, but I know in my area we're supposed to use metal shielded couplings when we're connecting sections of pipe like that. But I was recommended this one when I went to ACE, and that is not the code. So I'm guessing this one is probably used in installations where it's open, where you can actually see it, like under a sink somewhere or something like that, and not in crawl spaces or behind walls. That's just my guess. So just be wary out there that sometimes, of course, when you go to these hardware stores, you get people that don't really know exactly what they're talking about. So that's just a little bit of a warning there. Okay, so what I'm showing you here is a dry fit of all this pipe that I'm putting in. And so I've got a 2-foot section there, then a coupling, and then a smaller section of pipe that runs to the T. And the reason for the coupling in there is that when I bought all this pipe a long time ago, it's been sitting in the garage for probably, I don't know, probably about a year now. And when I bought all that pipe, I bought it in 2-foot sections. So instead of going out and buying another longer section of pipe, because this run here is about 27 inches, and you know, I would have had to buy a 10-foot section, I decided just to use the 2-footers that I have. So I've got that small section, then a T, another section of pipe, and then I left a gap in between these two sections of pipe. I think it's about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little longer, and that's so that the hub on the shielded coupling can fit between those two sections of pipe, and then I can clamp the shield around those two pipes. So that's how that's going to work.